Before you call this love, stop for a second and look closer, because what is happening here may be far deeper, stranger, and more unsettling than romance. Someone is not just thinking about you. They are carrying you in their mind like a secret they cannot turn off. And the reason has very little to do with your looks, your charm, or anything obvious on the surface. It has to do with what your presence woke up inside them without permission. That is why this connection feels heavier than normal. That is why their energy around you feels charged, almost electric, even in silence. You may think they simply like you more than most people do, but no, this is not that simple. This is what happens when one person becomes emotionally dangerous to another person without even trying. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear explains why some people cannot let go, why they act hot and cold, why they stare, withdraw, return, and never fully move on. It is not always because they know what they feel. Sometimes it is because they do not. Sometimes the deepest attachment begins where understanding ends. And once you see that, everything changes. Because this was never just about attraction. It was about recognition. It was about a part of them seeing something in you that felt familiar, forbidden, needed, and impossible to ignore all at once. And when that happens, love does not enter quietly. It enters like a force. It shakes things, it breaks patterns, it changes the story before either person is ready for what comes next. You probably believe strong love grows from shared values, timing, chemistry, or some easy explanation that sounds safe and reasonable. That idea is comforting, but comfort often hides the real truth. Because the kind of love that keeps someone awake at night, that makes them replay your words, your expression, your silence, your absence, is rarely born in logic. It begins below the surface. It begins in the hidden places of the mind where old desires, unmet needs, forgotten pain, and silent longing have been waiting for years. Then you appear. And without trying, you touch something that was never fully healed or fully expressed. That is the first shift. You did not just make them feel good. You made them feel noticed in a way that reached deeper than they expected. You made them feel exposed. And that is where intensity begins, because once someone feels seen at that level, they do not stay neutral. They do not simply admire you and move on. They begin attaching meaning to you. Big meaning. Dangerous meaning. They start to feel that you represent something more than yourself. Maybe peace, maybe desire. Maybe the version of life they thought they missed. Maybe the version of themselves they buried a long time ago. And when a person starts seeing you that way, they do not only want your attention, they want resolution, they want relief, they want the answer to a question they never knew they were asking. That is why the connection can feel so intense, so fast. It is not always about the present moment. Sometimes it is about years of inner pressure suddenly finding a face. What really pulled them in was not perfection, it was disruption. You broke a pattern they were used to. Maybe you were calm when they expected performance. Maybe you were distant when they expected pursuit. Maybe you were genuine where others were predictable. Whatever it was, you did not fit neatly into the boxes their mind had prepared. And that matters more than most people realize. The human mind loves patterns because patterns feel safe. But the moment something meaningful appears outside those patterns, the mind becomes alert, curious, unsettled, hooked. You became unpredictable in a way that felt important, not random, not messy, important. As if your presence carried a message they could not translate but desperately wanted to understand. And that is often when projection begins. They stop seeing only who you are. They begin seeing what you might be able to save, heal, awaken, or complete inside them. Watch this part closely because it changes everything. Once projection begins, you are no longer just a person in their emotional life. You become a symbol, and symbols are powerful because they bypass reason. They speak directly to need. That is why detaching from you becomes so hard for them. Letting go of you would mean letting go of the hope, the fantasy, the opening, the emotional doorway you created inside them. It would mean facing the part of themselves that woke up because of you. And for many people, that is far more painful than staying attached. So they hold on. Quietly, strongly, sometimes without saying a word, sometimes while pretending nothing is happening at all. And here is where it becomes more complicated, because what they feel is not always clean. It is not simple admiration. It is not a calm, balanced affection they can easily explain. It is desire mixed with fear, longing mixed with resistance, curiosity mixed with panic. They may want to move closer to you and run from you at the same time. And if that sounds confusing, it is because it is, not only for you, but for them too. This is why their behavior can feel inconsistent. One day they seem completely drawn in. The next day they disappear into distance, silence, or hesitation. It is not always because their feelings changed. Sometimes it is because their defenses woke up. Something inside them senses that this connection is reaching too deep, touching old wounds, old beliefs, old emotional landmines they thought were buried. So the mind reacts. It tries to protect itself. It whispers, "This is too much. This is not safe. This could change everything." And then the push and pull begins. Closeness followed by retreat. Warmth followed by coldness. Intensity followed by confusion. If you have felt that emotional whiplash, you are not imagining it. There is a real inner conflict happening inside them. A part of them wants what this connection offers. Another part is terrified of what it will cost. And the stronger the emotional charge becomes, the stronger that battle gets. So if they seem split, it is because they are. Not fake, not playing games. Split between the part that wants to feel everything and the part that has spent years surviving by feeling less. There was likely a moment when it all changed for them. A very specific moment, even if it looked small from the outside. Maybe it was the way you looked at them. Maybe it was one honest conversation. Maybe it was your silence at the right time, your calm in a moment when they expected chaos, your warmth when they were bracing for rejection. Something in that moment landed deeper than it should have. Something in them recognized you, not on the surface, but in a deeper and more ancient way. And once that recognition happened, their inner world began reorganizing around it. This is what most people miss. They assume intense attachment grows slowly and clearly, but sometimes it starts in one instant. One emotional spark, one tiny crack in the wall. And after that, their mind keeps returning to you again and again, trying to understand why that moment mattered so much. But the answer is rarely simple. It is usually because you came to represent something they had been seeking, avoiding, and needing at the same time. You became linked to an unfinished part of them, a longing they never named, a grief they never processed, a version of love they stopped believing in. And once you are attached to something unfinished in a person, their mind does not let it go easily. It circles it, revisits it, feeds it with imagination. That is why even a little distance can make everything stronger instead of weaker. Because distance removes reality and gives fantasy more space. And fantasy, when mixed with emotional hunger, can turn ordinary attachment into something that feels impossible to escape. Most people imagine obsession as something loud and obvious. Endless messages, dramatic confessions, constant pursuit. But real obsession is often quieter than that. It hides behind self-control. It hides behind silence. It hides behind the person who says nothing and yet thinks about you far more than they want to admit. Because the deeper a feeling goes, the more the mind may try to suppress it. And suppression does not kill intensity. It feeds it. The more they try not to think about you, the more their mind returns to you. They replay old conversations. They read into your tone. They wonder what you meant, what you felt, what would have happened if one moment had gone differently. It becomes a loop, not because they enjoy it, but because they cannot close it. You have become emotionally tied to something unresolved inside them, and unresolved patterns are some of the strongest forces in human behavior. This is why they may appear normal on the outside while carrying chaos on the inside. They might go to work, laugh, talk, function, and still feel your presence under everything. Still feel that ache when your name appears. Still feel that strange drop in their chest when you seem distant. And this is the part many people never understand. Their intensity is not just about wanting you. It is about what your presence activates. You have become connected to a hidden need, a lost feeling, a buried truth. And those things do not disappear just because someone decides they should. They wait, they grow, they ask for attention. So if you have ever wondered why they cannot seem to fully move on, it may be because the real struggle is not between them and you, it is between them and what you awakened. What you represent matters more than what they can explain. In the language of the deeper mind, people often do not fall for a person alone. They fall for what that person symbolizes, and you may have become a symbol of something they thought was gone forever. Maybe safety, maybe desire without shame, maybe tenderness, maybe freedom. Maybe the life they could have had if fear had not shaped them so much. That is why loving you, or even feeling drawn to you, does not feel light to them. It feels loaded. It feels costly. because to move toward you would mean more than getting close to another person. It would mean confronting the split inside themselves. One side of them says, "Go closer. This is real. This matters. This could change your life." The other side says, "Step back. This is dangerous. This will expose you. This will break the identity you built to survive." And both voices are strong. That is why they hesitate. That is why they may seem full of feeling one moment and full of fear the next. It is not confusion about you. It is overload inside them. They are trying to hold two opposite truths at the same time. They need this connection. They fear this connection. They want to be seen. They fear being known. They are hungry for depth. They are terrified of what depth demands. And because of that, they may try to create distance. They may tell themselves that space will bring peace, that time will calm everything down. But very often, time does not calm unconscious attachment. It sharpens it, because the less they can touch reality, the more the imagination expands your meaning inside them. And imagination is where the bond can become even more powerful. Once reality steps back, the mind starts building a larger version of you, a more meaningful version, a more necessary version. You become not just someone they know, but someone who stands for everything they crave and everything they fear. That is why the attachment can start feeling impossible to replace. It is no longer only about your real presence. It is about the role you have taken on inside their inner world. And here is the problem. They do not fully trust it. They do not trust how strong it feels, how fast it formed, how deeply it shakes them. Anything that powerful feels like it must come with danger. So their mind creates resistance, doubt, delay, explanations, stories. Maybe this is temporary. Maybe I am imagining it. Maybe I just need more time. But those thoughts are often less about truth and more about control. They are trying to reduce the emotional force because accepting it fully would require a level of honesty they are not ready for. It would mean admitting that this connection reached a place nothing else reached. It would mean admitting that what they feel is not casual, not replaceable, not easy to dismiss. And once someone admits that to themselves, everything changes, because now the question is no longer, do I feel something? The question becomes, what do I do with something this strong? That is where the real tension begins, because whatever choice they make, they lose something. If they move closer, they risk exposure, vulnerability, change. If they move away, they risk regret. And regret is not light. It lingers. It follows people for years. It returns in quiet moments when everything else seems fine, but something still feels missing. At some point, the pressure inside them starts becoming too much to manage. You can often feel it before they say anything. It shows up in the pauses, in the way they look at you for 1 second too long, in the strange silence after a simple interaction, in the moments where it feels like something bigger is happening beneath the conversation, even if the words stay ordinary. That is because their inner world is no longer stable. What began as attraction has become confrontation. They are no longer only dealing with feelings for you. They are dealing with the parts of themselves that your presence keeps bringing to the surface. Old rejection, old shame, old beliefs like I am too much, I am not enough, I will be left, I will be hurt, I cannot trust this, I do not deserve this. Then you appear, and without trying, you challenge those beliefs simply by existing the way you do. But the mind does not accept contradiction gently. It resists, it twists, it fights back. Because accepting something real would mean rewriting the story they have lived inside for years, and that can feel emotionally violent. So instead of integrating the feeling, they may fracture around it. One part of them reaches for connection. Another part pulls away and builds arguments, excuses, delays. Not because the feeling is false, but because the feeling is powerful enough to threaten who they thought they had to be. This is why their behavior may start making less and less sense on the surface. They are not only reacting to you, they are reacting to what becoming close to you would force them to face in themselves. So they start trying to contain it. They create little mental stories to reduce the emotional intensity. Maybe this is just a phase. Maybe it is timing. Maybe it is nothing. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But deep down, containment is not understanding. It is fear wearing the clothes of logic, because their body knows what their mind is trying to deny. Their nervous system knows. Their silence knows. Their restlessness knows. That pull toward you does not weaken just because they explain it away. It often grows stronger, quietly, relentlessly, until the effort of holding it in becomes exhausting, and unexpressed emotion always finds another form. It can become anxiety, sleeplessness, irritation, distraction, that constant feeling that something important is unfinished. You become the center of that unfinished feeling, not because they planned it, but because their mind linked you to something essential, something they cannot easily replace with work, noise, attention, or another person. This is why small cracks begin to show, moments where their control slips, moments where they almost tell you, almost reveal themselves, almost let the truth come out. Then they pull back even harder, because now they are afraid of the depth of their own reaction. They are afraid of how much you matter, afraid of how little control they actually have, and the cycle becomes unstable. The closer they move, the more they panic. The more they withdraw, the more intense the attachment becomes. This is not just emotion anymore. It is identity pressure, because to move toward you, they would have to become more honest, more open, more vulnerable than the version of themselves they built to stay safe. And that is the real breaking point, not the moment they admit they care, but the moment they realize caring means change. Real change, not soft change, not surface change, the kind of change that asks them to drop the old mask, the old defenses, the old emotional story that once protected them. If they go toward you, they cannot remain exactly who they were before. They have to risk becoming someone more exposed, more awake, more truthful. And for many people, that feels like losing control. But walking away does not save them either, because they do not leave empty. They leave with the feeling still alive inside them. They carry the question with them. What if this was real? What if I ran from the one thing that could have changed me? And that question has weight. It stays. It returns years later in random quiet moments. That is why some people never fully forget certain connections. Not because they were the longest, not because they were the easiest, but because they touched identity. They opened a door that could not be easily closed. Once that happens, forgetting becomes difficult. You are no longer just a memory. You are woven into a deeper place, into dreams, into patterns of thought, into sudden emotional flashes they cannot explain, and the more they suppress it, the more it finds ways to return. This is where the pressure reaches its highest point, because the human mind can only carry so much contradiction before something finally gives. Either they speak, either they act, either they disappear, either they break open. But the tension does not continue forever in the same shape. Eventually, it demands movement. That is what intense, unresolved feeling does. It asks to be faced, one way or another. Right before that moment, there is often a strange stillness. Not peace, not acceptance. A heavy silence inside them, like the mind has run out of arguments. They have tried distance. They have tried distraction. They have tried telling themselves it is nothing. But reality keeps returning. Your impact keeps returning. And slowly they understand that this was never only about controlling emotions. It was about confronting what those emotions reveal. You did not simply make them feel wanted. You touched the part of them that has been starving for connection, honesty, depth, and recognition. That is why this experience feels bigger than romance. It is exposing need. It is exposing grief. It is exposing how much of themselves they had locked away just to avoid being hurt. And once they see that, the illusion starts to collapse. They can no longer hide behind easy explanations. They can no longer pretend this is just attraction. The question begins haunting them in a different way now. Why you? Why this intensity? Why does this feel like something I have known without knowing? The answer is not neat. It rarely is. It is because you reached something unfinished in them, something buried so deeply they almost forgot it was there. But hidden things do not disappear. They wait for a mirror. They wait for a moment. They wait for a person who somehow reflects both the wound and the possibility of healing it. And that is what makes this so overwhelming. You did not only reflect who they are, you reflected who they could be if fear stopped running their life. And that realization can cut deeper than love itself, because now wanting you also means grieving the self they abandoned along the way. That is why every move feels costly to them. If they avoid you, it feels like betraying something real. If they move toward you, it feels like stepping into unknown emotional territory without armor, no safe path, no easy answer, only a choice between two kinds of pain. And this is where everything sharpens, because eventually they understand that this connection is not asking for comfort, it is asking for truth. And truth always takes something from us before it gives anything back. It strips away fantasy, it strips away the old excuses, it strips away the fake control we use to keep our lives emotionally neat. If they let themselves move closer, they may lose the carefully built identity that kept them guarded and untouched. But if they refuse, they may lose the chance to become the person they sensed in your presence. The person who can finally stop running. The person who can finally feel without hiding. The person who can finally choose something real instead of something safe. And that is why this attachment can feel almost unbearable. It is not only asking, do I love this person? It is asking, am I willing to become someone new because of what this person awakened in me? Very few people are prepared for that question, and yet, once it arrives, it does not leave quietly. It follows them into ordinary days, into routines, into sleep, into the moments when they seem calm but feel the emptiness underneath. So if you have sensed that they are fighting something inside themselves, you are probably right. This is not a small feeling, this is not easy attraction. This is the kind of inner shift that changes people even before they decide what to do about it. And once that level of change begins, there is no true return to who they were before. So what happens in the end? That depends on whether they choose protection or transformation, because that is the real choice now. Not whether they feel it, they already do. Not whether it matters, it already does. The real question is whether they will keep defending the old self or step into the unknown and let this change them. Some people confess, some withdraw, some act in ways that seem irrational because emotion has finally become stronger than the system they used to control it. And some stay silent for too long, only to realize later that silence became its own kind of loss. But here is the truth that remains in every version of the story. You were not just another feeling in their life. You became a turning point, a crack in the identity they trusted, a doorway into something they had been avoiding for years. And once that doorway opens, it never fully closes. They may walk away from you, they may delay, they may resist, they may pretend. But they cannot go back to being untouched. Something in them has already shifted, something has already seen too much, and that is why this matters, because people do not remember every attraction. They remember the ones that exposed them, the ones that shook them, the ones that forced them to see what they had buried. And if someone is carrying you with that level of intensity, it is because your presence did not only enter their heart, it entered their hidden world. It disturbed the silence there. It woke up a truth they could no longer keep asleep. And whether they move forward or run away, they will still have to live with what your existence revealed. That is the real weight of it. Not that they feel deeply, but that they may never again be able to pretend they do not. And maybe that is the final thing to understand. Sometimes the strongest connection in a person's life does not arrive to comfort them first. It arrives to confront them. It arrives to show them the distance between the life they are living and the life they secretly ache for. It arrives to expose the walls they built, the emotions they buried, the honesty they delayed, the love they thought was too risky to hold. That is why this can feel beautiful and frightening at the same time, because anything powerful enough to wake the soul is also powerful enough to shake the structure built around it. So, if you have felt that heavy tension, that silent pull, that sense that something deeper is happening beneath the surface, trust that feeling. Something deeper probably is. You may have become the person who forced them to stop lying to themselves, the person who made the old defenses feel too small, the person who made distance feel painful and closeness feel dangerous. And whether they rise to meet that truth or keep running from it will define more than this connection. It will define the person they become after it. Because moments like this do not pass through a life without leaving a mark. They divide time, before and after, before the awakening, after the awakening, before the illusion broke, after the illusion broke. And that is why they cannot treat this lightly anymore. They know, somewhere deep down, that what they feel is not random, it is not casual, it is not ordinary, it is a crossroads, a demand, a mirror, and sooner or later, everyone must decide what to do when a truth this intense stands in front of them and refuses to disappear.